We've been talking quite a bit about the Sinclair Media story and their control over so-called local news stations. And I recently wrote an article for Pluralist about this, and I wanted to discuss the article with you. And I hope you'll also read it. We're going to be linking to it in the description to the YouTube clip for this story. And I'm really excited actually to be working with Pluralist. It's a new platform for political discussion, and they explore all sorts of ideas in culture and politics. And I'm excited to be writing on their website. And my first article with them tackled this issue of Sinclair Media. And Michael Copps, who's a former FCC chairman who was appointed by George W. Bush, he's calling Sinclair Broadcast Group, quote, the most dangerous company most people have never heard of. And among people who follow the news, the Sinclair Broadcast Group name has almost become a household name because of this viral story. And as a company, they've accumulated 172 local news channels. They now sort of rival Fox News in terms of growing ubiquity as well as in pro-Trump programming, right? They have a decidedly pro-Trump pseudo right-wing bias to the extent that Trump is a right-winger. And Sinclair is also now in the process of acquiring Tribune Media for a ton of money. That would place its right-wing message in 72%, almost three-quarters of American households, as we recently mentioned on the program. And the political slant of Sinclair wasn't ever really a secret. Right before Trump's inauguration, Jared Kushner actually bragged that during the election, he was able to, quote, strike a deal with Sinclair, promising Sinclair access to the campaign. And in exchange, Sinclair-owned stations would provide favorable coverage of Donald Trump. And in 2016, Sinclair, whose channels, again, are in predominantly swing states, released 15, quote, exclusive interviews with Donald Trump and none with Hillary Clinton. And now what has pushed the Sinclair story viral is these must-run packages, right? That are, as the name suggests, they must be run on every single one of Sinclair's affiliates, or at least the ones Sinclair determines need to run it. And very often these segments are nothing but a regurgitation of conservative talking points filled with Trump-era cliches like snowflake and fake news. But I actually am making the case that the problem is way deeper than propaganda and the political bias of the content towards Trump and skewed towards the right. The entire infrastructure is a systemic problem because it completely undermines the purpose of local news. When Sinclair sends out these mandatory political content packages and they force feed the national discussion into so-called local news, they are basically saying, well, it looks like local news, but it's really not local news. And the reason that that's an acute problem is that Americans believe that their local news is more trustworthy than national news. And the reason why is obvious, right? We think locally, we live mostly locally, and so we're predisposed to believe that the material we get from our local anchors is more authentic, more relevant to our community than the national stuff. And to a degree, it's true, or at least in theory, it's true. So when people don't realize that their local news is carefully crafted propaganda from this national company, Sinclair is able to exploit the faith that many news consumers have in their supposed local media when they're actually just selling us an assembly line right-wing message. And this is hugely destructive because in the not so long run, it's going to mean the demise of regional diversity on television, and even local TV is going to look identical across the country more than it already does in that format, which I've actually talked about before. And I recently read a defense of Sinclair's practices because you can always find someone willing to defend just about any practice. David Harsayani said that Sinclair is doing, quote, advocacy journalism, and that that's valuable, and that it's good to have competing biases in society so that all views are heard and can be challenged, or something along those lines. And sure, I mean, in principle, he's right. We want a marketplace of ideas, and we can evaluate ideas and decide what makes sense and what should prevail. But the problem isn't that a biased media company is being biased. It's the lack of transparency. It's the bamboozling of viewers that's happening when Sinclair monopolizes local markets and people don't even understand what it is that they're seeing. And I've explained before, I've been talking for years, that one of the despicable things that Fox News does is they blur the lines between what's news and what's opinion journalism. And you wonder as you watch, am I watching a report right now or am I watching a commentary? And it's by design that you often can't tell, or that Fox News mixes them together. And Sinclair is doing another version of that. Am I watching local news or am I watching force-fed national talking points produced by someone who's cozy with the president and struck a deal with Jared Kushner, packaged to be delivered by my local anchors who I think have my community sort of as their priority? So what can be done about this? I genuinely have no idea. I mentioned that Sinclair is looking to buy Tribune Media. That's currently being considered by the FCC. We can't really count on the current administration's FCC to stop it. We've got FCC chairman and Trump appointee Ajit Pai being investigated by his own agency, and yet still the odds are in Sinclair's favor that the FCC is not going to get in the way of the purchase of Tribune Media. So if there's a hope, it's going to be found far from corporate media. And the silver lining is that the internet has plenty of independent journalists and news outlets. And yes, I am one of those. And certainly this is a circumstance where I stand to gain, but we also all stand to gain from more diversity in voices. We need to be supporting other models of funding that enable the audience to actually find and decide what are the voices and messages that actually reflect their beliefs or their ideals and cater to their interests and values and morals. And the real silver lining here is that, which is that hopefully the Sinclair media scandal wakes people up to the reality that you've got to support independent media. When so-called local news stations are increasingly owned and managed either by the big news networks or by media conglomerates like Sinclair, we need to look elsewhere. And that's why we're working to expand the show and doing all of the other things that you know that we are doing. Send me your thoughts about my commentary and article on Sinclair. It's on Pluralist. We're linking to the article in the video description for the YouTube clip for this story. The video you just finished watching was made possible by you through the membership program. You can sign up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership. We are viewer-supported independent media. You can use the coupon code IVoted17 for a 40% discount off of your membership.